I'm Diana Macedo. We have breaking news. Kentucky officials are giving an update on the deadly UPS plane crash in Louisville. Let's listen.
Around the crash site to not consume water. EEC, the Energy and Environment Cabinet, is working closely with the city on this. Other areas are safe. Now, if you are in the suburbs, if you're in other parts of Louisville, you are as safe today as you've been any other day. The air is fine, your water is fine, but that immediately around the crash site, we're just trying to be very careful. In new news today, following yesterday's events, I'm declaring a state of emergency to help us deal with this plane crash. It allows us to move resources more quickly through emergency management and the Kentucky National Guard. It allows state resources to be used also through our agencies to be readily available, including disaster resource management, expenses related to response, and more, as well as reimbursement. It's going to help to make sure that groups that are already limited in terms of their funding can get some immediate or short-term help as they wait for reimbursement for the costs that they've expended. Additionally, I've taken action to establish the Team Kentucky Emergency Relief Fund to help those affected by this terrible event. The URL for this site is going to be on the screen. Similar to previous storm disaster funds, every dollar donated will go directly to those affected. In fact, what we've done is we've gone and amended the Team Kentucky Storm Relief Fund to now allow families impacted by a disaster like this to also benefit from the generosity of Kentuckians. Remember, the first thing that we pay for out of these funds are funerals, so that in a time of grief, nobody is worried about that. In Kentucky, we grieve together and we support one another. Donations will help pay for funerals and for response, recovery, and rebuilding. All right, while Kentucky is responding to this crisis in Louisville following yesterday's deadly plane crash, we must also remember the challenges that our families are facing due to a lack of SNAP benefits brought on by the Trump administration. This is a program that was under attack early by the president following the big, ugly bill. That's why in June I wrote a letter to Kentucky's congressional delegation urging them to consider the harmful impacts of this legislation and how it would hit our people, because SNAP is crucial for Kentucky. In our Commonwealth, over 600,000 Kentuckians rely on SNAP. That's 1 of 8 of our people, many of which are kids. These families need this support to avoid going hungry. But on October 1st, the federal shutdown began, and this now, today, marks the longest shutdown in the history of our country. From the start of the shutdown, the president made it clear that this program would be at risk. In fact, the Trump administration stopped the federal government from paying out SNAP benefits for November and also stopped states from flowing state funds through SNAP to pay out those benefits. And that's despite the USDA's website saying that he could fund SNAP benefits even in a shutdown. Americans should never be a negotiating tool. And I am committed to taking action to do what we can to stand up for our people. So on October 20th, I announced that while we were exploring options for SNAP, we had 2 updates that would help many who rely on this program. First, after learning our area development districts had exhausted the nearly $10 million in funding for senior meals, I announced that we were able to move $9.1 million to help fund that program. It took a lot of work to find a solution. Thankfully, we did, and the General Assembly leadership agreed to move forward with that plan. That day, I also announced that for November during the shutdown, that we could cover the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, or TANF program, that the federal government was not going to fund. That was about $12 million that's helping our people, many of which also get SNAP benefits. Following that update on October 24th, we received a letter from the USDA confirming what had already been threatened. The letter said it was suspending all November.
We're listening to Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear there announcing he's declared a state of emergency after the deadly UPS plane crash in Louisville. Right now, 9 people are confirmed dead, but that number is expected to rise as some are still missing. They're saying more than a dozen people are injured. I want to bring in our transportation reporter, Sam Sweeney, and our aviation expert, John Nance, for more on that. Sam, what's the latest on this investigation, and where does it go from here?
Well, hundreds of firefighters worked to put out these flames. There was more than 220,000 pounds of fuel there. This was a very hot fire, and those investigators are going to focus on those black boxes. And did they survive those flames? It was an extremely hot fire, and there is a chance, despite them being in the tail of the plane, further away from these flames, there is a chance that they did not survive that, and the NTSB will, of course, figure that out. They are on the scene right now, and we are expecting an update around 3 o'clock.
John, they're saying not to drink the water immediately around the site. Is that the top priority at this point, figuring out whatever environmental issues going on there?
I think it's one of the concurrent responsibilities because there may be some unburned fuel that is getting into not just the water table, but basically certain portions of the landscape is torn up so badly by the momentum of this crash. But one of the most important things, though, is recovery at this point, and recovery especially of anything that might be a clue. Sometimes it's just a piece of metal that may be the linchpin to the whole thing.
And Sam, they say parts of the plane were on the runway here. What does that tell you?
Yeah, we saw some of the chopper video that was coming in last night from over top of that runway, and it appears that one of the engines actually separated from the plane and was found there near the runway. Investigators are going to look at that very closely. Why did this engine perhaps fall off of this wing? Did it happen during the explosion? Was there debris on the runway? What happened here? And is that part of the reason that it appears that this plane lost control and then barrel rolled through this debris field?
John, if this plane had an engine on fire or even an engine fall off, as Sam is talking about, is there a way to get out of that? Should the pilot still have been able to navigate this safely?
We all train for this constantly, to lose the critical engine at the point of rotation and be able to fly the airplane out. The aircraft are certified. Any jet aircraft is certified based on its ability to do that, to be able to continue on fully gross weight with only 2 engines. But that's why something more than catastrophically wrong here. It wasn't just the engine explosion. It was what that explosion did to the aerodynamics of the airplane.
Sam, how long are we talking before we have some real answers here?
Well, the NTSB will give us a briefing today. They likely will give maybe a few facts, but they will never speculate. They're not going to rule anything in. They're not going to rule anything out. They work methodically through each investigation. They're going to go through the maintenance logs, the maintenance records of this plane. We should mention that for much of September and into October, this plane was out of service, likely for some sort of heavy maintenance. Also, this weekend, it was not flying on Saturday or Sunday. It didn't return to service until November 3rd. So they're going to be looking at all that. What was happening to that plane? Does that have anything to do with it? Or was this, some debris on the runway that caused this? We simply do not know. But the NTSB will go piece by piece. They will, of course, use all of this video that is now coming out. That is going to give them some answers. But it'll be 30 days before we have a preliminary report. But we may not have the final cause of this incident for at least a year, but possibly 2 years.
John, what are you watching for next in this investigation?
Basically, the readout, the recovery, and then the readout of the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder. Those are going to be 2 very important things. And as Sam mentioned, they're going to have to be digging through a lot of wreckage to find them, hopefully, because they can take just an incredible amount of heat and impact. Hopefully, they will be intact and be able to deliver us the information that we critically need to know what the sequence of events was.
All right, Sam Sweeney, John Nance, thank you both.